So the last thing I wanted to cover with you was the interview that Elio and Linda did with House of the Dragon showrunner Ryan Condal. And for those of you who don't know, Elio and Linda were the original Ice and Fire superfans, and they've also collaborated with George in a few Ice and Fire related books. And the interview was actually pretty interesting because they go into some of the stuff we've been discussing and complaining about, like the violence, the sex murals, his favorite book, stuff like that. Do you want to go into it?
There's some interesting stuff in here, but Elio and Linda are very funny as and I don't mean funny ha or anything like that. They're interesting interviewers because they know so much more about the material than the person they're interviewing. Like, and I'm not saying that Ryan Condal doesn't know a lot about the material, but it's also like these are very specific questions about stuff that Elio and Linda know everything about, and so it's like it's kind of interesting to read their questions and because I often know what they're getting at, but you know, you kind of know their own opinions about the books and the show and things like that. So the first thing in the interview is they start talking about the ratings and how the ratings are through the roof, and so. And then they do ask about the violence of the tourney, because I know that both of them kind of raised an eyebrow at, as I think a lot of fans did, about the amount of violence that happened in the tourney in the first episode. And there's this question of whether or not it was purposely hyper-violence, as like in the same way as we sort of, you know, when you watch a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Oh yeah.
And you know, Quentin Tarantino knows the world isn't this violent. You know, the viewer knows the world isn't this violent, but we're going to show something like insane on screen, just to like make a point. Like we're it's almost parody, you know? Mm-hmm. And they kind of, they're, so Elio kind of asked the question like that, but, I don't know if Ryan Condal's answer was really getting into that, but he said he was trying to evoke the ideas, the imagery of like Roman Colosseums, which is kind of funny because the whole Roman Colosseum of gladiators battling to the death and blood being everywhere and the audience being like loving the death is also kind of myth. Like that didn't actually really happen in history. Like the gladiators didn't die as often as movies like to show them dying because, you know, they're not stupid. They don't want to kill each other. If these people die, who's going to be in the next show and things like this. Like, not that deaths didn't happen, but it wasn't just like butchery. Though it's funny because, A Dance with Dragons, the fighting pits of Meereen are definitely that level of butchery, but it was just kind of, so Ryan Condal's answer is that he was kind of going for that kind of stereotype. But of course, like even the like movie portrayals of Roman Colosseums are already like exaggerated. And then he asked about the orgy murals that are on the walls in the Red Keep. And he said, yeah, I wanted to bring up like the idea of like Roman decadence, you know, near the because like this idea, and of course that's also a myth from history, which is also a kind of funny thing, is that so when like the Middle Ages and later, when they like to portray Rome, they like to put forward this story that Rome had gotten to this point where they're all these polytheists, like drinking and having orgies and vomitoriums, and it was ridiculous. And it was such a great thing when the Roman Empire like fell because of their decadence. But that's not what happened at all. Like the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, and was a Christian empire when the barbarians came in. The height of their decadence, their decadence didn't lead to anything. There was no cautionary tale. But in the Bible, when they start talking about like the fall of Babylon and the fall of Rome, like these are made analogous to each other, and the Armageddon happening. It's always this idea that there's this hubris, that the society gets to this point where it's like decadent and we're bathing in pig's blood and having sex with 20 people at once and stuff. And you're like, no, like that didn't happen. Like that wasn't the reason anybody like if it happened, it wasn't the thing that led to any sort of downfall. So Ryan Condal's like he wanted that imagery that this is like a decadent, like the Targaryens are this like decadent society that has reached this point that needs to like fall, and that's what the Dance of the Dragons is. Or but of course this is all like based on kind of movie myth, because this is not historically really what happened. I don't know if I'm making much sense here, but like,
no, you are.
But it all kind of relates, that he's creating this world that is very much based on a Hollywood myth of Rome and like popular ideas of Rome, but we're not actually like Rome, which is kind of funny because we have this history book that's unreliable. With unreliable narrators, like speaking of this Targaryen time, where we're not really sure what's happening, and characters like Mushroom are making it more explicit than it actually was, But it's a little different because we're seeing it visually on screen. So anyway, they touch on all of that, but what else do they talk about in this? They talk about how both of their favorite books are Feast for Crows, which is probably my favorite book too of the Song of Ice and Fire series. That it has kind of the best writing, and it's thematically the most cohesive, which I agree with all of that. Though I think some people don't like Feast for Crows because it's not the characters that they're interested in doing the things they want. And it perhaps has some pacing issues.
You should put this a poll up on Twitter. I noticed you've been putting up a lot of polls on Twitter lately, by the way.
Well, it was about creating my video. I needed some polls for my latest video.
You should put one up on Twitter to see what everyone's favorite book is, because I'm sure Storm of Swords will get like #1 spot.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be Storm of Swords, or some people like a Game of Thrones the most.
That's me.
But Feast is probably down at the bottom for most people. So I think I'm trying to think of what would be my least favorite. Probably Clash would be my least favorite, though I do like Clash.
I'm with you on Clash being my least. They're all good. It's just they're
all good. I think Clash has too much like Tyrion like in his own head. Like chapter after chapter, and Arya wandering around doing nothing. He brings up Elio brings up the Hedge Knight, and he's like, "Oh, I got a lot of the Hedge Knight from your from the tourney." And Ryan Condal is just like, "Yeah." Like I was like, I don't know if he was really if he really read the Hedge Knight at all.
I feel like most people haven't really read the Hedge Knight, and I think a lot of book readers don't even know it exists. Because the Hedge Knight, yeah. I think one of the forms of it I see most available is a comic book, and a lot of people who read the books don't want to read like a comic book.
I mean, I guess for a while people didn't read it because it was just hard to find, but now they released it in the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms book, so it's a little easier to it's a lot easier to find now, but
Well, the reason I say people don't know these other smaller stories exist is because they weren't given the same amount of attention as Fire and Blood was, because the marketing behind that book was very apparent. Like George even went on several talk shows to promote it, and I remember because they even asked who his favorite king was, and he said it was Jaehaerys. But yeah, going forward, they should really make an effort to pump out the marketing for a lot of these smaller minor stories.
Yeah. Or Carmine is saying when he says Hedge Knight, he means all the Duncan Egg tales. Hedge Knight just being the first one,
mm-hmm.
But George has said that he wanted to write like 7 or 8 of the Hedge Knight stories, and that he's kind of gotten into, or he has written some, or has at least planned all of the 4th one, which has we all, the fans all call it the She-Wolves of Winterfell, but it probably would have a different name. But
we all know how it ends, though, right? Yeah. It ends with like the deaths of Dunk and Egg and most of their family.
Yeah, we kind of have the broad strokes of what happens to Dunk, but like over their lives. But we we just have the first 3 tales, and Hedge Knight, Sworn Sword, and Mystery Knight, like word for word, they're better than Ice and Fire. They're really good stories. But they're short and there's not that much to them.
What else did he talk about? He talks about
how the Targaryens are. He was saying that the Targaryens how the Targaryens are not traditional Westerosi, and that this was kind of a big point when he's talking about how they act at court. Like a lot of us are, like as viewers, are kind of creeped out about Rhaenyra and Daemon being into each other, but some people watch it and are like, oh, but like there's no taboo among the Targaryens, and I was like, I don't know, like I kind of disagree with like there's no taboo. I think there is still kind of taboo. And so he kind of says like, oh, this is a different society and they have their Valyrian ways. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I would probably disagree with Ryan Condal on this. Like, Queen Alysanne came in and like, this is when they like became a very religious family. And so this idea that like, oh, they're just, going to be sleeping around and talking about and going to the brothels and it being attracted to their family members and things like that. Like, I just don't necessarily believe it, but I don't know. I mean, it's also my reading of Fire and Blood is different from other people's readings of Fire and Blood and stuff. So, like, one big thing in Fire and Blood, for example, is Balon and his wife, Alyssa Targaryen. Not Alyssa Velaryon, but Alyssa Targaryen. They keep writing that like, oh, they were super into each other and they loved having sex. I'm just like, they probably didn't, like that's just like, like they were brother and sister, like who were like politically married. Like, no, they probably didn't like each other. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, but one could read it and just be like, well, Targaryens don't have that taboo. And it's like, biologically human beings have that taboo. You aren't naturally attracted to your siblings. Like, that's just so I think I don't know, like it's one of these readings I wouldn't have had. Like there was the Targaryens have been in Westeros for over 100 years at this point and have gone through many changes, and so this idea that they're culturally very different, I don't necessarily buy it.
To be fair, statistically. So I am, what would I call myself? Would I be first? No, I wouldn't be first generation.
You're definitely first generation.
Because I wasn't born in the United States. But I've been very Americanized. And I would argue if there was a war between America and Brazil, my loyalties would lie with America. Statistically, though, my children would be very pro-Brazil.
Right. But they'd still be, they'd still be very, well, there is a little bit of a pendulum where the first generation tries to assimilate as much as they can, and then the second generation like tries to go back, and then by the third or fourth generation you're just so fully assimilated that there's no going back, right?
But that's usually how it happens, though, quite often.
Yeah. So and so here we're on the fifth generation here, right? Because the generations are Aegon, Aenys, Jaehaerys, Aemon, Balon, and now we're on the Viserys Daemon generation. Like they're assimilated to Westerosi way of life, like
But then you have Daemon,
know.
who's very Valyrian supremacy. Like,
right, but that's all show stuff, right? There's none of that in the books.
Yeah,
there's none of that in the books.
There's almost nothing in the books in regards to like how he really feels about certain things. Because in the books, you do get the hint that he just kind of is using Rhaenyra to get closer to the throne. Here, it's almost but confirmed that's what he's trying to do.
But there still seems to be a genuine sexual desire.
I think he's more sexually attracted to the Valyrian. This is gonna sound weird. I think he's more attracted to her because she's Valyrian and she's a dragon rider, more so than he is to her. And I don't think she understands that.
Right. Everyone's talking about, like, you know, watching the show, and everybody was kind of making the same jokes that the only way that Daemon got it up again is the fact that, like, he's having sex on top of a dragon and the dragon's, like, arouse him or something. Right. Of course, this is very different from the source material where, like, you know, if someone were to task me with, like, using the source material to make Daemon a very good character, a hero, I could probably like write a story like that says like, no, like justifying every moment, like, no, he did this for this reason and he's a good person for this reason. I could probably do it for the whole story. While here in the show, like, Daemon's done so many evil, like a few evil, I wouldn't say so many, but he's done a few evil things where I'm just like, nah, he's a bad person. Like, I could make an argument with the source material that he's a good person. Now, Elio asks something similar to this on the characters. So he said, because I do know that a lot of people have been watching, and one criticism people have of the show is, who am I supposed to root for? They're all bad people. And Ryan Condal did have a very interesting rebuke to this, where he says, yeah, but no one's 100% evil either. Like, there's no Joffrey characters, there's no Ramsay characters, there's no Roose Bolton characters, there's no Euron Greyjoy characters in Fire and Blood. Like, there's no Brienne, Davos, Jon characters either, right? Like, everybody is kind of both a mixture of evil and good. Which is an interesting point. It is true that there's no character that's like, I mean, well, Larry Strong seems to be fucking bonkers, so that goes against that. Larry Strong seems to be Ramsay level evil.
Well, you're a fairly pragmatic, logical guy. Of course, you see it from that point of view, but the casual fans, they need that good guy character.
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of do agree with the fan criticism. Like, there's not currently a character that's, I mean, you know, if we want to root for Lionel Strong and Harwin Strong, but they're dead.
All the morally good characters died last episode. Lionel. Yeah. Harwin on some level, Laena.
Right. And I suppose Rhaenyra hasn't done anything too horrible yet. I mean, you could say like, oh, she was, you know, trying to pass off some bastards as trueborn, but that's not so bad, you know? Like, it's not necessarily like, it's morally bad for that environment, but not for our environment, not for the viewer's environment. Like,
I will say on that topic real quick, I do love how some people are trying to use that to bash her, but at the same time, she has an agreement with Laenor. It's not like she's going behind her husband's back like Cersei did with Robert.
No. I got a really, really, oh God. I want to read this really bad comment I had. Can
you do me a favor and say the person's name so we can bash them too?
Well, here, because I've seen similar things written about, oh, sorry. I've seen similar things written about Rings of Power where they're like, why are all the male characters like either evil or stupid, and all the girl characters are you know, strong and
you know, that's Elon Musk's
great.
comment, right? Elon Musk bitched about that on Twitter.
Oh my God. It's just... So somebody posted it recently for like when we did our Rings of Power discussion, and I was like, you're bonkers. Like, you're absolutely bonkers. Like, what are you talking about? Like, Rings of Power, like all the male characters, like the villain on the Numenor island is a black woman. Like, what are you who's like trying to keep like it's just like ridiculous stuff where I'm just like, for many episodes, like, she's the antagonist, but whatever. So I got this one that said, why are all the men either, this is House of the Dragon we're talking about. He writes, why are all the men either idiots, bumbling, violent, or submissive? While the women are strong, domineering, clever, and cunning. Why do they keep showing us how hard and deadly childbirth can be? The same reason the Valyrians are black. The writers think they're on the front lines of the culture war and they must push their agenda in all aspects of their lives. And I wrote back, I'm not sure what you're talking about. The women in the show have been portrayed as reckless idiots. I think you've been watching too much anti-SJW stuff and are viewing the show like a whiny beta cuck.
Well, so I'm gonna be such an asshole when I say this. There are only realistically 2 main female characters in the show.
Yes.
Rhaenys barely appears in the show. Laena barely appears in the show. You just really have Alicent and Rhaenyra. Am I missing someone else?
The main characters of the show, yeah.
Right.
The Princess and the Queen.
The Princess and the Queen. And we just discussed this earlier in an earlier segment. Rhaenyra is an asshole. She's out here.
Rhaenyra is an asshole, and she's reckless. Yeah.
She's reckless. She's over here. Well, first off, Rhaenyra is not only insulting many ladies of the court, as we saw in episode 3, she's also insulting Jason Lannister, who is a great member of a great house of Westeros. Not only that, but she's out here worried that she's going to be passed over for this guy, for her little brother, who's the male, who is a male. Despite being the heir, she's worried about this. So instead of making diplomatic ties with people, she's kind of just pushing them away. And she even outright insults several lords, as we saw in episode 4 when she's in Storm's End. So she's not really making the best impression on everybody. So I don't know what you guys are talking about, what this person's talking about.
I don't, right. And I think some people, when they view the show, might say, well, you know, like, there's lots of wild, like, teenage girls. And you're like, but you gotta understand, like, all of the pressure and that has been put on Rhaenyra, and recently put. Like, keep in mind that she's heir to the throne, and she's the central figure in a prophecy to save the world. Okay?
A prophecy that she doesn't know is going to happen in 120 something years.
Right.
She thinks
that is going to happen soon.
Right.
Right. And like within how long does it take her to go out to a brothel with her uncle and to almost fuck her uncle at a brothel? Like, what are you fucking thinking? Like, I don't care if you're 15, but like put like Prince William at the age of 15. Do you think he would have put like his reputation on the line to sneak out and go to a brothel in the middle of like with his aunt and like almost fuck his aunt in the middle of a brothel in downtown London? Like he wouldn't have fucking done that, you know? Like, there's a lot and that's just for a really useless monarchy that doesn't do anything, right? not an actual real monarchy and the like a prophecy to save the world. Like, it's really irresponsible. Nuts, you know? So Rhaenyra is fucking nuts. Like, she's reckless. There's nothing portrayed good about her. Even though she's probably the last character we can root for in the show. Because everybody else is horrible.
By the way, you touched on the topic of diversity, because that idiot commenter mentioned Corlys. So Ryan Condal and Elio, they discussed that briefly, yeah?
They do. They brought it up, and Ryan Condal said that it came to his mind because there was actually an interview with George where where he kind of said, I was always thinking maybe to that of making the Targaryens black in the first place. I think Elio kind of calls him out a little bit because Elio knows every George interview. And he's like, I think I know what you're thinking about. I think he was waxing poetically. Like he was just like, maybe I should have made them black. But I don't think, like, Elio doesn't think he actually, like, really thought about it historically, like when he was writing the book. Though he did do something very similar in Night Flyers. So the protagonist of Night Flyers is a genetic supremacist who's black. And then over the course of the story, she opens up and stops being racist. So it's not like George wouldn't write something like that, but Elio's saying like, nah, George probably didn't, like, wasn't really seriously considering making the Targaryens black, but he kind of jokes about it or thinks about it in this interview or mentions it. And so that kind of seeded the idea in Ryan Condal's head that maybe we could have some black Valyrians, which, logically speaking, they had colonies all over the world, so why not? I suppose.
Why not? Yeah. It's real weird. If Valyria had a bunch of people that probably survived, no House Celtigar.
Well, they also mentioned that House Celtigar is going to make an appearance. So
you're going to get your boy Bartimos
Celtigar. He said that because Elio brought up the scene in which Corlys says, "Oh, the last two great Targaryen houses," and he's like, "Is that a goof?" And Ryan Condal's like, "No. Corlys was just being a dick." To House Celtigar. But he's like, House Celtigar, we know about him. We make jokes in the writer's room ourselves about House Celtigar. They're going to appear. And I was like, okay. It's just that he was like the last great Valyrian houses. Like he's diminishing House Celtigar.
That's funny.
Saying that they're not worth, or like, yeah.
I hope they make I hope there's like a rivalry between Corlys and Bartimos. Because for those of you who don't know, Bartimos Celtigar, I believe he sits on Rhaenyra's council and on her small council as like master of, not ships. What was it? Was it laws? He's something. I know he's on Rhaenyra's council, so I would love it if there's like a bit of a rivalry between him and Corlys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'll be funny when he makes it, when he appears finally. He was Lord Treasurer and Master of Coin.
Oh, there it is. So, yeah. Is there anything else of importance in that interview? Because I feel like a lot of the questions. So everybody likes to jerk off like, oh, wow, you should watch this channel. They interviewed George. Like, what is George going to say? And I've made this comment before about how the real interview would be with Ryan Condal, since he has all the insights. And I think Elio and Linda pretty much covered everything I wanted to really know. The bloody tournament, the sex murals, where he stands on certain things in the lore. The likability thing, which
I have to give him props that it's a pretty good interview where they ask some very specific fan questions fans have been dying to know, and really gets Ryan Condal to open up about a lot of different very specific but very important issues. So I do think it's a very, very good interview. So I give him props for it. It's probably the most interesting interview I've seen. Like a lot of times, like, Entertainment Weekly will do an interview and like people will be like, oh, there's this one line where somebody says something interesting. Like you said, like that interview with
Emily Carey.
Emily Carey, where she says one interesting thing. Like there's a good like dozen interesting things in this interview. So I do think it's worth a read.
It is worth a read. And real quick, do you want to talk about the stuff George was anal about and how Ryan Condal went out of his way to make sure he corrected all of that?
Oh, right. So there's a couple things about sigils. So this is also very odd. So they ask about sigils. So House Velarion's sigil in the books is a seahorse, but in the show here, the sigil is horse, half with a seahorse tail, and there were some discussions about that, and so and they got into like they sat there and were like would they know what seahorses look like and things like that. But he showed he thought that Elio was surprised that George didn't want the regular seahorse, and he's like, I don't know. I showed him the artwork for the half horse, half seahorse thing, and he was fine with it. And he's like, okay. But then he asked him about the Targaryen sigil having 4 legs, which is a this is an ongoing thing for Elio, because like Elio said that. So Elio went very early in Game of Thrones. He was invited to the set and he saw a Targaryen sigil, and he said, and it had 4 legs, and he's like, yeah, George is kind of anal about this, but like the dragons only have 2 legs, you know. And so they changed it. And so for most of Game of Thrones, there's there's a 2-legged dragon, because this is a very George thing where George like explains that like there's no animals on Earth that have 4 legs and wings. Like that just doesn't happen. So let's be scientific about it, about dragons. So they changed it, but then somehow at the very end of Game of Thrones, when in season 8, when Daenerys is pulling up her Targaryen banner over the Red Keep, that dragon has 4 legs. And so Ryan Condal has made it his fucking mission to somehow fix that goof. And so he's like, well, he's saying that like in his headcanon, Daenerys had never seen the Targaryen sigil. And so she only saw dragons. So when her dragons hatched, she was like, oh, this is what the dragons looked like. I've heard about my sigil. I'm going to plop what a dragon looks like based on the dragons I've seen. And that's why the 2-legged dragon is there. But then over time, when she finally made it to Westeros, she found a real an old Targaryen sigil. And so she switched it to actually what they had in Westeros.
Mm.
So that's his headcanon explanation. And so that's why like there's the 2 different versions. Now as for like George being anal about the 2 legs versus 4 legs, Ryan Condal's explanation is like, look, this is a fantastical depiction of a dragon. The dragons don't have 3 heads. Like it's you know, it's okay that it's got like 4 legs. And it's like, okay, you know, I've got no horse in this fight. I don't fucking care like what the fucking animals look like on the sigils. By the way, I know we've been going for a long time, but I want to say that like, Westerosi sigils are actually kind of, most of them are kind of shitty. Like they wouldn't exist historically. Because the colors and the animals like can't be viewed from far away. There's actually like specific laws about what heraldry looks like and what colors work. And like there's actually, I've seen actually charts about like which sigils are pretty good and which ones like are horrible, where you're just like, what, no one would ever have that sigil. Like that's a ridiculous sigil. So for instance, like Lannister sigil is a very good sigil, but then again, the Lannister sigil is very close to nearly every European sigil. Right. Where you have like, you know, yeah, two colors and a clearly like visible, like thing that you can see from far away. But if you looked at like Stark, for example, that's like a white direwolf on gray. Like that's a really shitty sigil. It's like from far away, you're not going to be able to fucking see that. Or like the Boltons, which is like a red bloody dude on a pink field. You're like, oh my God, like, no, you can't have that be your sigil. Like that's like from far away, no one's going to know what the hell that is. Like,
by the way, you spoke about the Velaryon sigil. Every artist always has their own interpretation. I sent you something on Facebook. Is that what they were originally talking about? Because that looks more like a horse instead of a seahorse. A horse with like a fish serpent tail.
Yes. Yeah. So in the books, the sigil is clearly yeah, that's right. In the books, the sigil is clearly described as just a seahorse. But in various depictions, we have like like the one you sent me, which is from, I think, Fantasy Flight Games.
Yes.
Yeah. Like that's like an aqua line horse. Like he's got like wavy legs, and his body is almost like a wave itself, and like other ones I've seen have like a horse with hooves, but like a fish body. Like it's like a mermaid, but a horse mermaid instead of a seahorse, But as it turns out, people knew what seahorses looked like. Like Roman artwork had like seahorses and stuff in it. Like there were some seahorses are tiny, but some seahorses were large enough that people knew what seahorses looked like. So the Velaryon sigil is in the books a seahorse. So
Preston, I know I've kept you for too long. Do you mind if we wrap it up here?
Yeah, sounds good.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.